We're going to talk today about the early history of ASU-Beebe. ASU-Beebe didn't start out as ASU-Beebe. The founding date is 1927, so we're coming up on the centennial. And for the last 2 years, I've been working on a centennial history. So this will hopefully will be coming out in a book next year. And this is basically the first 2 chapters that we're going to look at. Some slides relating to that material. Of course, the book will go into a lot more detail and have a lot more facts and so forth in it. But I wanted to cover some of the basic things and talk about some of the interesting aspects of campus life and what it was like and the events surrounding the founding of the school and how it developed as the Junior Agricultural College of Central Arkansas, and then eventually would turn into Arkansas State College, Beebe branch, and then later on, of course, it will be Arkansas State University at Beebe. The founding is due to this man, and his picture is also up there, the same picture. He is State Senator William H. Abington, W.H. Abington, or Doc Abington, was in his first term in the state Senate in 1923. In February of that year, they were having a debate over moving the University of Arkansas from Fayetteville to Little Rock. And the state Senate president was from Fayetteville. He was representing the university there. He said, I don't want to move. And he makes this offhand statement that's reported in the Arkansas Gazette. He says, if y'all want to involve because it's making a lot of money, it's really big and really gives you a lot of prestige. If y'all want a school, an agricultural school like that, something, you can just make one yourself, right? Now, Arkansas at that time was divided into 5 congressional districts. And we had an agricultural college in 4 of them. But we were in the 5th district here in Central Arkansas, and we didn't. So Abington, who hadn't really been into education before that, he pushed for a lot of bills in his first term, but none of them about education. He suddenly says, okay, this is my chance. And so he says, I've gotten a petition from just about everyone in Beebe saying, we want the school here, right? And of course, he doesn't get it. But right away, he starts thinking about, let's create an agricultural college here in Beebe, not just in Central Arkansas, but in Beebe, where he lives. And so, 1924, the very next year, he's going to return to the legislature. He gets a bunch of townsfolk here in Beebe to contribute money, literally. We have a list, $70,000 to the movement of putting a state school here. And he introduces it in 1925, doesn't pass. 1927, he goes over to the House of Representatives. All right? And he organizes it in such a way that there are several little schools on the roster, but none of them get passed except this one. Act 132 of 1927 creates the Junior Agricultural School of Central Arkansas. And it says that school is to be located about 50 miles from the center of the state, the geographical center of the state. And it can't be within 70 miles of any other agricultural college. Now, you plot that on a map. Here, deliberately here. That's the only place. This is the only town that fits the characteristics. To add to that, the law says you have to have a paved highway nearby. and you have to be within a mile or so of a railroad track. Here, almost literally where we are sitting, is the only place that meets that. And so, in 1927, this act is passed, signed by the governor, Mr. Martineau, who is from down here in Lonoke County, right? And the Junior Agricultural School of Central Arkansas, and Mr. Abington, Senator Abington, now Representative Abington, is responsible. We can go on. Okay. Now, although W.H. Abington, Doc Abington, will be responsible throughout the period of the agricultural school and college for getting the money for it, because he's in the legislature every time except for two, up until his death in the early 1950s, his death in 1951. He's responsible for getting the appropriations, and he does it. That's his job. But he's not involved in running the school directly. His brother is. E.H. Abington, another Doc Abington, is put on the Board of Trustees. He's basically going to stay there until the late 1940s. Right? So E.H. Abington will be the defender of the school, be the organizer of things. He will sign the diplomas and do all these as the president, what we call today the chairman of the Board of Directors and Board of Trustees. So this is the fellow. E.H. Abington, interestingly enough, will write an autobiography, Backroads and Bicarbonate, toward the end of his life. Published in 1955, he will publish his book. It does not mention this school. But it does not mention the school. It only mentions his brother indirectly. Right? There was a falling out. There was a falling out. But nonetheless, we have a lot of information about politics because he was a leader in the Democratic Party here in White County for a long time. We have a lot of information about the behind-the-scenes things. So he's an interesting fellow. All right. He was going to be the chairman for 10 years, 1927, 1937, then remained a member until the late 40s. He's especially hands-on, especially on the farm. He runs his own farm, scientific farm in White County here. We have pictures of it from the 1930s. So he's very interested in orchards and in farming and agriculture. All right, so we can go on. Now, this is a neat picture. This comes from the 1925, I think, Quill, which was the high school yearbook. First principal of ASU, or not ASU, but the Junior Agricultural School of Central Arkansas, will be Hannon H. Holzclaw, called H.H. in all the records, but I found in the census, first name Hannon. Interesting name. He would stay here only a couple of years as principal, and we find him by the mid-1930s moving to Lincoln County, where he becomes the school superintendent down there. But what's interesting about him is he's the only faculty member here. The law which sets up the school says there will be a principal who will be in charge of teaching all these agriculture classes, and it specifies the classes. They're all agriculture classes. He's the only teacher provided for. He can hire 2 assistants. That's it. That's the faculty. And so he ran the place. He helped to lay it out. He helped to run it. He also ran the agricultural program for the high school under the Smith-Hughes program, the program that starts FFA, right? And another interesting thing I found was that the old agriculture building over here, where I think admissions is now, or where admissions was originally called the Smith-Hughes building. So it was one of the earliest buildings here, and it may have been something that the high school ran. I don't know for sure. We'll hear more about that later. Okay. One of the neatest things is that even though you don't know for sure who the students were and what the classes were like, you do know that we had football. W.H. Abington, day one, said, we're going to publicize this school. And he went out looking for football players. One person that was interviewed in the 1980s said he went as far as Oklahoma to try to find tough kids. All right. And so in August of 1927, August 28, 1927, this clipping appears in the Arkansas Gazette saying the ASU-Beebe, the junior agricultural school, there's no question, is going to enter the football arena. And Joe Fuqua, he was a former All-State or S-State player from Oklahoma before he moved back to Beebe a couple of years earlier, is going to be the quarterback and the captain of this team. Okay, so we can go forward. And there is Smiling Joe. In the same newspaper, there is a full-length picture of it. It's kind of, I had to mess with it a little bit to make it fit. So that's not his exact dimensions, but he was the captain of the football team. He was also a boxer. We have things where he boxed. Apparently that's where he got that nickname. And he was a semi-pro baseball player and a basketball player. So he was all over the place. They played several games just that first term. That they played freshman teams. They played walk-ons. They didn't play the first string, but they won several games. Look, and we had the names of the players, at least the last names of the players. They're all boys, of course, for the football teams back then. But the first building actually built for the school was a girls' dormitory. In 1928, September of 1928, we had 85 students going and having a reception out south of here, about where we are now. It was the south side of this area that where we are now. This would be where you are later, but originally it was the girls' dormitory, and it was built and completed in 1928. It was a girls' dormitory. They weren't just boys going to be here, right? They knew that they were going to include girls in the school and have home ec and all those things, right? There may only have been 39 students that first year, first semester, but we've got 85 coming to the reception, and they're from all over the place. It tells the counties that they're from. We already had the name of one graduate in that first class in 1929, Annie Lee Blackwood. And the only reason we had that is because she got married a month later, and the notice of her graduation is embedded in that marriage announcement. We don't actually have an article saying there's a graduation ceremony and here's the graduate. But we have her name in her marriage announcement. She is the only graduate we know of from that first class. And apparently she was just taking agriculture classes because that's all the law allowed them to teach. Okay? In 1929, going into that second phase, if you will, second 2-year term, apparently Hirschclaw is leaving. 1929 is an important year because W.H. Abington was actually the Speaker of the House of Representatives for the state. He got into a lot of trouble. He got into a brawl. Literally, they broke the Speaker's gavel. Had to create a new one. And there may have been some trouble related to some things. There were pushes on the one hand to get this thing turned into a failure school, but on the other hand to abolish all these schools altogether. And so they had to fight, literally, almost. Okay? So Holtz would leave. They hired, according to the records of the Board of Trustees, they hired a new principal. His name was W.R. Curry in April of 1929. I have no record of a W.R. Curry ever showing up in Beebe or in association with this school. The only W.R. Currys in the census, there are 2 or 3 in this general area, but they are not people who would be the superintendent or the principal of a school like this. They are dry cleaners. They are, sharecroppers. They are, The only W.R. Curry that fits is a fellow named W.R. or William Randall Curry, who is from Kansas. He had been an educator in Kansas. He was an agricultural expert, and he was winning prizes internationally for his poultry and various things. But he lived in Benton County, which is past Fayetteville. It's way up in the far corner of the state. And unless he came down here and stayed with somebody else for a little while and went back, I don't know. I don't have any proof that that's who it was. But there is another graduation ceremony in May of 1929. I don't know any of the graduates, but I don't have it here, but there is a clipping that tells the speaker. Okay? So I know we had classes. Now, can you see this? Not very well, probably. That is the only picture of the first superintendent of what will then be the Junior Agricultural College of Central Arkansas. In 1931, Act 60 is passed, again with Dr. Abington being the primary sponsor, and it will turn the agricultural school into an agricultural college. So we will not just teach agriculture classes, we will also teach English and math and all these other things which will be given for college degree. So people could transfer, right? That's when we turn into a college. The next superintendent that goes along with this is Tate McGill. And the only picture I've ever found of him. He had been a coach down in Prescott in South Arkansas, and was a winning coach down there, but he was also an agriculture teacher, a biology teacher. So he would preside over the school in the early 1930s, the first 2 years, 1931 to 1933. The post-graduating classes, the college, was in 1933, and we still have some diplomas from that. We have records of who the graduates are there. Tate McGill was a widely respected man. A lot of interviewees, a lot of alumni who came back to reunions later always talked about Coach McGill. So he was a widely respected man, had a project in, though. In 1933, as we'll find out, there was something that happened to the school, and he left. Went back to Prescott for a while, eventually wound up working for the post office in Louisiana. His little son died at the age of 6 or 7 while he was still here. And 10 years later, in 1943, he killed himself and his wife in Louisiana because he was apparently still so depressed over that. He had lived with it so much. But he was a well-respected coach and a well-respected member of the of the faculty, but we had more faculty now, not just him. We had English teachers, we had biology teachers, he was biology, we had history teachers, so what? And we also had a student newspaper. And here it is. This is the only copy of the Herd Call, which was published not by the institution, but by the English 1 and 2 classes. It's a paper that includes college students and also high school students, right? Because from 1932 on, this was the high schooler too, right? For a long time. And it tells in this thing, if you can read it, and you can still read it, about the teachers and the kids talking about them and what they did and what they were like and what they look like. But it's tremendously interesting, and I hope that's a good thing to say. You've got to read my book later, right? All right. So the Herd Call. Don't know how long it lasted. Fern Collins, who was the English teacher, was the one who sponsored it. Because of what happened to the school in 1933, she didn't stay on. None of them, virtually none of them stayed on very much longer, except maybe one or two. Right? Okay. Oh, by the way, that says 1931 on it, but it's actually March of 1932 when it was published. The internal evidence shows that. It's a leap year. Right? So they got the date wrong on it, but otherwise. All right, we can go. You guys, I know I tend to get going on this. I don't know how much time we've got left. So, the Herd Call has some major features, but you can see it talks about the Aggies. It talks about the agriculture classes. We taught agriculture classes. Whether they were taught by the high school side of it or us, that's the question. And we still taught some agriculture classes associated with this campus. All right? We had a 320-acre farm, but the fellow who ran it seems to have been more closely associated with the high school than with us. So, yeah. This is the most notable fella from that first generation, besides Tate McGill. And this thing would stay on for a while. Coach, again, Bro Irwin, Ambrose S. Irwin, was a high school teacher, but also was hired to teach the college classes and be a coach at the college. He would stay here from 1931 all the way to 1950. And then he would go across the road, and later on in the 60s, he would become, 50s or 60s, he would become the high school superintendent. He's talked about a brown-eyed or a brown-haired, handsome he-man in the original paper, but apparently he lost a bunch of it later on, so this is him in the 1950s, and he's in the yearbooks. Okay, so he's in charge of intramural track, basketball. He's especially important for discovering basketball players. I want to read you something. About Bro Irwin. Now, I'll give you a little bit of background first, or you won't understand this. In 1943 or so, for some reason, the state legislature was again saying, we don't want to give Beebe any money. But they said, we will, but you got to do a couple of things first. One of them was fire Bro Irwin. Literally, they put it into the law. You've got to fire Bro Irwin. Orville Henry, the famous sports writer and sportscaster and so forth, already working for the state newspapers, wrote this. If they are going to fire Bro Irwin from his athletic post at Beebe Junior Agricultural College, someone should amend the University of Arkansas budget bill to give Ambrose a pension an athletic scholarship or something. For years, Beebe and its territory had been proving grounds for Razorback basketeers, with Bros sending such stars as the Adams brothers and other name, Ben Jones and others to Fayetteville. The fog wallen of the bushes, Owen has made Beebe and Bro big time. Right? So he was well known across the state. A very prominent fellow in statewide things, so much so that he attracted the attention of the legislature. Who's Proud Allen? Okay, I'll answer that question real quickly. That was just the name of a famous coach at the time, a national college coach. Okay. All right. So we're talking about that paper. We're talking about other things we'll say related to the school in its early days. College, high school things are basically equally divided. They talk about the teachers and what they're like, how much some of them chew gum, and how much some of them sleep, and teasing them. Some of them go to hear concerts like Paderewski, the great Polish politician and pianist. And they're really admired. They also talk about other students, and they call themselves a cow college. A herd call, right? Okay, 1933, politics. The state legislature refuses to give us an appropriation. They've been arguing this for years. We've got to kill these little schools out here. They're political schools. They're only there to make local politicians look good. And they're saying this is just for the Evingtons. That's all it's for. 1933, they don't get a appropriation. They get $300 to hire a watchman. But that $300 is critical, right? Because it means the school's not closed. And in fact, there are still students here. Who are they? They're the high school students. Because the girls' dorm turns into classes. It turns into the high school. So there are students here. There are still faculty here. But it's just not the college working for a couple of years. 1935, it comes back. We get $8,000. Compared to what we had been getting, that is something. We're back in business. One question that emerges, this building, you recognize that building. I talked about it before. Where did it come from? 1929, there's a mention in the newspaper of two buildings on this campus. One of them is the girls' dorm. What the other one is, it doesn't say. That's the only other building that I can think of that might be here. Some of the records for the school say that wasn't built until 1934. But in 1934, the school wasn't operating. Right? So we don't know for sure where this building comes from. But it's still there. Still one of the oldest buildings on campus. Yeah. 1935, when we go back to operating, a new superintendent is appointed. Hank McGill is gone. Joe S. Williams is the superintendent, and I had no pictures of him. J. S. Williams is a very hard name to define. It's so normal that you can't really identify. So he will only be superintendent for a couple of years, though. And then this fellow, John Baumgartner, who had been a school superintendent at Berkeley, will come over and become the first president of the Junior Agricultural College. In an interview he did when he came back here in 1965, he talks about the process where he is named president. Right? We'll have presidents from then on. This is a picture taken in 1942 after he left the school with his first wife, Lorella. But this is him, apparently a pretty popular and pretty successful leader of the campus, although we still had a lot of work to do. How he first come to us, just to mention this, he had taught in 1932 as a part of a summer school here, but it was being run by what is now UCA. It wasn't run through us. It was being run by what was then the ASTC, Arkansas State Teachers College. But that gave him an in, and later on he will be appointed the president of Junior Agricultural College. During his term, State Hall is built. Of course, it's not called State Hall. It's called the Administration Building. They've been talking about a building like this for years. The company of D.C. Abington was going to build it like they did the girls' dorm, Abington. But because of the appropriations, they couldn't get that. That building was built by the National Youth Administration. It was built by 60 students working on funding from the federal government through the New Deal. Right? April Coleman or one of the other alumni who were there back then said they did a lot of piddling around. You know, she couldn't say much for them, and it took them 2 years to build it. It was not finished until 1939. But did a pretty good job. It's still standing. It's still our administration building. Okay? They also built that building, which started out not as the party building. Party college is what it's called here in the 1950s. Apparently where the student union and so forth where it was. It started out as the home ec building. And it was built by National Youth students and finished in 1938. Today, the Ruth Couch Center. All right? What was campus life like as these things were being built? Well, we know, again, a little bit about it firsthand because of this. This is the only copy of the Central Collegiate of Junior Agricultural College. And it is dated January, I believe, or February, late January of 1942. Anyone tell me why that date is significant? (1942). Well, it's right after Pearl Harbor, right? December of 1941, start of World War II, the entry of the United States into World War II. We've got a lot of falls here, right? So this is the best detail we've got about what campus life was like here during World War II. Okay? One question. Let's go on, because I talk about this next time. We have other sources like these campus catalogs, the first catalogs that we send out. But the Central Collegiate gives us articles about and written by students. And there are editorials written about our entry into the war, how patriotic we need to be. There are jokes about how we have to tease the men for letting their beards grow because they can't use razor blades. They're saving the blades for the war effort, right? So it gives us an idea. It also tells us that the president of the college then is taking his job very seriously. He's going places. He's talking to the state legislature. He's traveling to conferences. He's trying to develop the curriculum and make a more professional college. Okay? Not much has really changed in some ways between those two, the 1932 issue and the 1942 issue. We still have teasing. We still have the gossip. We still have uh, things about clubs and presentations and plays and things. Um, we had advertising from the local community. In other ways, though, we've got uh, let's go on. We've got the seriousness of B.E. Whitmore, the new president. We've got all these things that I was talking about, weekly assemblies where they debate issues as well as have games and events. And they had editorials about the war. We know a little bit about what the war was like here at BB. Lizzie Edward Whitmore, B.E. Whitmore, is the president during the wartime period. He will leave for a time and go become superintendent of schools at Augusta, but then come back in the 1950s. So he serves 2 stints. But a student during this period would become really famous. I think others deserve to be, but the one that becomes really famous is George Fisher. You look up here, that's the Fisher Gallery, right? George Fisher grew up here in BB and went to school here during World War II. He left to join the service. He went to England. He married his wife, Snooky. And that's her last name, Snook. Right? And they come back, and he will take up the job of editorial cartooning, first in Tennessee, Memphis, then come back to North Little Rock and into Little Rock, works for many years with the Gazette as their chief editorial cartoonist. And he's a very prominent figure, lots of books and so forth. This is a picture of him coming back years later during one of our alumni reunions. He was the head of the alumni club, if you will, in the early 1950s. World War II eventually passed, right? And as we go into the late 1940s, the school changes. You know, we have lots of students come to us during wartime because they want to avoid the draft, maybe. We have, list of graduates, and you see during the wartime, a lot of girls are going into teaching, they're going into these professions and so forth. Maybe 1 or 2 guys will be listed. Why? Well, a lot of the guys are in the service, maybe. So we have a lot of changes. The enrollment is a problem, but housing them is not. We have this dorm. We're going to get another dorm north of State Hall by the end of the 40s. But in between, we've got these. We've got Army barracks. Where the Grove is now, we had 10 hutments, they were called, which were 2 apartments each, sitting on top of each other. And this is one perspective. This is the dorm way back there that would eventually become the second girls' dorm, the first Princess Hall way back. So this is looking at it from State Hall, right? This is where married students will live. This is where some faculty would live. Eventually, a later executive of the school, called a dean, would tear one of these off, would have it torn off, and he would take it somewhere else and make a house out of it. Basketball players would live there, right? This stayed there through the late 1940s. This was something that was given by the government to schools free because it was surplus, because it was extra. It's part of our tradition. That dorm up there that I mentioned is this one. It's a new college dorm. Later it becomes known as Chieftain Hall, which is built by the late 40s. The earlier one turns into classrooms for a time. The interesting thing about this building is that it's co-ed. not used to hearing about co-ed dorms in the 1950s, I think. That one was. It had a partition in the middle of it. You weren't supposed to be able to get through it from one side to the other. The boys had to climb up the ladder on the side. The girls came through the front door, and one of the teachers, a woman named Josephine Stone, who was the art teacher and a math teacher, she had a little apartment there. And there were people there keeping track, right? But Will Owen, who later becomes a chancellor of the school, lived there during this time. And in his interviews, he talks about Radicon. No. He talks about how strange it was, you know. I guess that would be a way to say it because of it being so unusual, I think. Right? Anyway. One question. By that time, we'd gone through two more presidents. One of them is virtually unknown to me. A fellow named M.L.D. Stone, who would be here briefly and apparently follow some Royal Field faculty members. They often people with doctorates from Columbia and Yale and Stanford, things like that on paper. But he doesn't last very long. And it's a little bit hazy. Why? He eventually goes back and becomes the superintendent of the high school. But nonetheless, we have some political stuff under the surface. That leads to the hiring of a new president, Arthur Lloyd Collins, known as A. Lloyd Collins, this fellow. A. Lloyd Collins, as his picture shows, liked to write. He was a historian. He also taught sociology at Harding and for a while. He was very much interested in religion, and well, from a religious perspective on many things. He was interested in military stuff. He had a collection of guns. If you went to State Hall in the late 1940s and walked down toward the end where I believe the concurrent office is now, that's where not just his office, but his apartment was. He lived there with his wife and son. He had a collection of old rifles and weapons on his walls, and you're going to see them in just a second. Maybe. Go one more. Okay. One more. Yeah. It was like a mini museum, and he was proud of it. He even showed it off to everybody. Now, he was brought there in order to clear up the politics, to make the school look better, fix it up, make sure the faculty was up to standard, had the qualifications for the classes they were teaching, make sure they weren't teaching more classes than they could handle. But we know that the faculty were very much burdened. They were doing the housekeeping as well as everything else. We were literally sweeping the floors and cleaning the bathroom. Right? So it was not really a really pleasant time. Not many people liked A. Lloyd Collins, apparently, especially on the Board of Trustees. And eventually they run him out. Let's go back. I want to talk about a couple of other things. Let's go back one more. Okay. All right. Yeah. During his time, though, we did get, for a couple of years, an aeronautics program, surplus again. We have two flight instructors, both veterans. One of them owns the planes. They actually train students to fly. But planes eventually were gotten rid of because they've turned into scrap. They're used for mechanics. Let's go one more. We also start a student yearbook for the first time. It's called the Minuteman. And you can see why Adrian Collins would like that. A guy with a gun, right? And it stays there. It stays with. We're going to see it again later, even after Minuteman is gone. We begin to see the Minuteman in 1947 and 1948, and it's going to continue on as long as we're junior college. One question, Bull Owen, here he is again with his basketball team. He is an outstanding coach. He's widely respected. And he stays on until 1950-51, right? Before he goes out. We begin to see new coaches coming in at that time. So we will move on. Collins is replaced, and Irwin leaves about the time that Boyd Johnson becomes, again, the new president. He had been the dean under Collins. He'd also taught history class. He wrote a history book, Arkansas history book. But in 1953, his most notable contribution, though, is he brought girls basketball to the school. It may have been year before. We have a kind of thing in an early newspaper article about the sextet. And girls basketball was 6 players back then, as Gina Menzie would tell me. So we may have had girls basketball early on, but it kind of got lost. Boyd Johnson will bring it back and be the coach in the early days. Okay? He will bring with him a couple of other guys of significance. Edgar Kirk would be his new dean. Again, live in State Hall in an apartment for a while with his wife. He'd be loved by the students. I mean, when I came down here in 1998, an old lady stopped me in church one day. I was living up in Batesville at the time. Says, "You're going down there?" I remember Dean Kirk, and they called State Hall for a while, Kirk Hall. They dedicated the yearbook to him. He was really beloved. I met him one time in the 1980s. He, really a great gentleman. We also got Charlie McGrew, who we have to credit for bringing Jenny Lindsay to this campus. Right? He's the one who recruited her. She was going to go to Henderson. And he went to a desert, and he found them all sitting on a bench one day, and he said, "You want to come play for ASU-Beebe?" Okay. And so begins the tale. Here's Dean Kirk teaching his class, a lot bigger classes back then, right? Seems like. And here's Mrs. Coleman. Ethel Mannion had been an alumnus. He graduated back in the 1930s. He'd been in World War II, an intelligence officer. Now she's coming back to teach business classes, typewriting of all things, and commercial subjects, as they were called. All right? And here's Joe Stone, the art teacher, math teacher, sitting in the dining hall. The original dining hall was in the girls' dorm. Probably moved later on. But so that we have a lot of congregating of students. She's the one who becomes famous for living in the girls' dorm. She's also the one who brought the original kiln to the school so we could begin ceramics. All right. You think of buses with high schools, right? We had buses too. Back in 1932, there was an accident up near Searcy between one of our school buses and a passenger car. A student was driving our school bus. They often had students. Jeannie Lindsay herself came to the school and she drove a bus for a while. This school bus ran into an out-of-state passenger car, which had a hitchhiker on the side of it. You know, the running board. There was a 25-year-old hitchhiker. We had no idea what his name was. Got hit and killed. 1932. You would think that he'd gotten rid of him, but no. We had 5 school buses, even into the early 1950s. Right? And here's a picture of them. They ran various places: Cleveland County, Prairie County, Lono County, of course, White County. Right? Now, what was school like in those days, in the 1940s, late 40s, early 50s? Freshman day. That's one thing we have from the yearbook. We have these pictures, montages of what student life was like. Freshman day was a day of dressing up, men as girls, girls as men, like carnival, right? And we have contests. We have a court, a mock trial, where judges are created and issue punishments for people who don't follow the rules. So it's a very festive day. Okay? We also have a lot of dances. Seems like every other week we have dances, we have parties, we have something going on. And plays. Not as many as we would later, but a few. All right. Then we get our final student newspaper, the Vanguard. This is where we get our school name today, right? Our school mascot. You see the mini bone? Stay there. This is the same one. I chose this paper because my dad's in the picture, first of all. It's the only one where I found him. He's hiding in the back. But also, because it's got an article about George Fisher in it and his alumni thing and so forth. So I used this one. This paper will be started around 1950-51, and it will continue until 1993. So it will be the student newspaper, the official voice of the campus for many decades. And it is at first not going to contain local commercials or advertising, but it will get it back later on. It's mainly about the campus. It's mainly about the college. And it talked about it in depth. So I'm just going to leave it there right now. That we get a lot of information about what the school is like and what happened. Okay. Girls basketball. Girls and boys basketball. Very popular. Marvin Spo would become the new coach, and he would stay here until 1986 with a foot stint up at Jonesboro in between. He would come back, and he would be a major figure in PE and girls basketball for many, many years. The girls basketball team in the early 1950s was a national powerhouse, won championships. And there's Jeannie right there. Right there in the corner. So we have players who will become very much associated and attached with this school. President Johnson left in 1953. He went back to Camden to run a bookstore. He didn't get forced out. He just had other things to do. He was replaced once more by B.E. Whitmore. Remember, B.E. Whitmore had been president during World War II. So he would return from his stint in Augusta and become the president again. He wanted to bring not just teacher education to the school, but he wanted to bring back vocational education. B.E. Whitmore would make a major mistake here. I have the newspaper clippings over here to actually prove it, what the state was saying about him. He allowed, an audit found this, so he had to admit it. But he said, the school is not offering any agriculture classes. It's an agricultural college, but it's not offering any agriculture classes. which could be mandated to do. Now, they say that a law of 1947 said we had to. I could not find that law. Right? The law creating the college in 1931 adds, the academic things. Doesn't say we just have to teach agriculture anymore. Doesn't necessarily say we stop. There's some confusion here. The fault is we hadn't had the money to pay an ag teacher and get the equipment and do all the things we needed to run an ag program. So we're an agricultural college that does not teach agriculture. And that was a big scandal, especially when we had $80,000 lying in the treasury that hadn't been touched because of some technicalities. Final, Whitmore hoped by telling the state this, that they would give us more money so we could do that. But instead, they said, no, we're going to cut you off. They're going to close you down one more time. And so he went and he began with the trustees to talk to other schools, four-year schools, about annexation. He talked to Fayetteville. He talked to ASTC, which was now UCA. And finally, he went to Carl Ring, the president of Arkansas State College in Jonesboro. And Ring thought about it and said, okay, this is what the cartoons were like. Beebe Agricultural Junior College, state's education system is plowing it under, right? That's what it could have been. But Carl Ring said, no, we'll save it. But he didn't do it out of his own goodness. He didn't say it because he had any special feeling. So let's go on. He did it because he wanted to be a state university. And he thought having a branch campus and having connections in the center of the state would help him. But when you came down here, when you got involved and looked into it, and especially when he found that there were some certain laws which specifically assigned us money that couldn't go to anyone else, right? He said, yes, that's something that we want to do. And so in 1955, L.H. Autry of Mississippi County, way up in Bible, sponsored a House bill which said we're going to abolish the junior agricultural college, but we're going to turn it into Arkansas State College at Beebe. Okay? So the Act 84, that finalized that was passed February the 18th, and July 1st, 1955 was the formal date of the transfer. All the records were handed over, the Board of Trustees dissolved, and the Jonesboro trustees took over. Everything took off, and now we're going to be Arkansas State JC. Not JAC, Beauty Junior Agricultural College. We're going to be Arkansas State JC. This is the old arch. And that's Lawyer Hall behind it. That's the old girls' dorm, right? Which would eventually be torn down. So this is a basic accounting of who we started and how we got to be Arkansas, associated with Arkansas State University. And it needs to be made clear that it's almost miraculous that we survived all this. But thriving and continuing as we did, it is very, very clear that we probably wouldn't have done it without Jonesboro, without somebody. And that's a hard fact. Right? It's not a hard fact. It's just a fact. Right? It's a good fact in ways. But we shouldn't forget the early history either, because there's one thing that really stands out. Really, really, really stands out. From the first day of the college in the 1930s, when we get more faculty here and more students here and everything, and we get this first student newspaper, we're a family. They act like a family. They have parties like a family. They play bridge and go on picnics. Petit Jean Mountain. They take the whole school to Petit Jean Mountain for years. A small school, right? We act with each other like a family. All of the teachers know all the students, right? And we can't do that anymore, really. But we still got some of the same aura about us, right? And that's one thing which makes us stand apart and makes me very happy to have ended up here. As I told you, my dad was in some of those things. He was a student here in the 1950s. And actually, I was going to some of these things the other day, and I found an alumni thing which actually had his name on it. Really cool. But we're want to keep that. That's one thing which I hope to do in the book as we carry it forward, to show that even though we grow, become multi-campus, do all these things, that we still retain some of that feeling.